morning. Welcome to Ask Wardee. I'm so glad to see you here. Welcome to those who are joining me live. I see people coming in. Welcome to you who are checking out the replay later. This is just really fun for me to visit with you every Wednesday for Ask Wardee to take your traditional cooking questions. So for those of you that don't know me, I am good morning to Meg. Hi. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Wardee Harmon with TraditionalCookingSchool.com. I'm the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Fermenting Foods. I've also authored a whole bunch of ebooks through my site, including Sourdough A to Z and Lacto Fermentation, Cultured Dairy and Basic Cheese Making, just a lot of the fundamentals of traditional cooking, going deep and helping you really incorporate those into your lives to make a difference in your health and in very easy ways. If you're new here to Periscope, welcome to Periscope. I'm glad to see you. If you've been joining me for a few weeks, welcome back. I'm going to start with my usual question, which is, what are you drinking today? What did you bring with you? Today I'm doing a DIY herbal coffee homemade mix that I learned from my friend Jessica Espinoza. Meg is eating bone broth. Hi to Kimmy who just joined. And if you're interested in your own DIY herbal coffees, because you love the taste of coffee, but your body doesn't love coffee, which is my case, check out the ebook. It's at tradcookschool.com/DIY herbal coffee. Well, I'm so glad to see all of you. So we have clementine and clove tea. Jamie is having a latte with gelatin. Fantastic. Good. I'm glad you all brought a drink with you. And K.M. Brooks says nothing yet, waiting for sprouted banana bread to be done. Yum. We have a Harney and Sons tea with Seb. Great. Well, if you're listening to Ask Wardee on the replay, it doesn't mean you can't join us for a drink. So plan every week to check out the replay and pour yourself a cup of tea or latte with gelatin like someone just shared, and put your feet up and just enjoy. Well, let me just cover a couple more things before we dive into today's question. A couple housekeeping notes here. The way to show love is to tap the screen. You can do that live. You can also do it in a replay later if you're watching the replay within 24 hours on periscope.tv/tradcookschool. So I love the hearts and thank you so much. It really makes me feel good. Another way to show love is to share. So if you're here live or watching the replay later on Periscope, you swipe. Or if you're live, you tap that Perry guy in the bottom corner and you'll get instructions. It's kind of intuitive. I say kind of because kind of. I don't find it particularly that straightforward, but anyway, you tap the Perry guy and you're swiping. And you can share on Periscope, you can share on Twitter or Facebook, and I just so appreciate. Thank you for all the hearts and love and for sharing. I am covering questions on Ask Wardee every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And I want to let you know how you can submit a question for the future. You can tweet me at TradCookSchool. It's the handle behind me. And be sure to include the hashtag AskWardee. Or if you're not on Twitter, no big deal. Send an email to wardee@askwardee.tv and let me know what your question is. So we have a question today coming up from Alina. Before we get to that, I want to make sure you all know about a free gift I have for you. One of the things that we provide at Traditional Cooking School is instruction in lacto fermentation. And I have a free gift for anybody who wants it, and it's a fermenting formulas cheat sheet. It gives you quick and easy instructions for creating all kinds of ferments, salsas and relishes and beverages and chutneys and krauts and all kinds of things. So if you want to grab that, go to tradcookschool.com/ferment sheet. You just put in your first name and email, and shortly you will get that cheat sheet on the way to you. Welcome to everyone who's continuing to join us. Okay, so let me open up my notes here because today's question comes from Alina and it's all about kefir. How do I know if my kefir grains aren't good anymore? And I'm going to read you Alina's question, and then I'm going to talk to you about kefir. So if you have questions about kefir in particular, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover Alina's question, and then I'll have time to do some Q&A at the end. If you have a question unrelated to kefir, you'd want to save that for a future episode, and I just gave the instructions for how to do that, and I'll give you instructions again at the end. Thank you for the hearts. All right, so Alina says, How do I recognize if my milk kefir grains are not good anymore and need to be replaced? The reason I'm asking is that for the longest time, my kefir grains weren't growing. Let me bring the computer closer so I'm not quite looking so far away. In the end, I found out the reason. It turned out the temperature in my fridge was too warm, so my raw milk was starting to turn sour in less than 10 days. I would still use the soured milk to make kefir, and I think this is what made the grains not grow. Competition from the bacteria for souring milk, with a question there. I have turned down the temperature in the fridge and the milk lasts forever now, at least 3 weeks. How long is raw milk supposed to last anyway? Now I do not use sour milk anymore and the grains grow quite nicely for the first time, but I notice that the kefir becomes yeasty. There is this yeasty blanket on top. I stir it in and it's still good, but I wonder if maybe I should get different kefir grains. Maybe these ones are not that beneficial or healthy anymore. Thank you so much, Alina. All right, so I'm going to start at the very beginning with kefir. First of all, and I saw a comment pop up because you guys are saying kefir, and somebody said, I say kefir. Well, as far as I know, there's 3 major pronunciations for kefir. I say kefir, you can say kefir. I think the official pronunciation is kefir, and you will hear all kinds of them, so feel free to use whichever one you want. Now, kefir is a fermented dairy, a lot like yogurt. However, it's a different starter culture. The starter culture are grains like this. Now they're in a picture quite blown up. Grains are not that big. I mean, if you looked at the size of, like, they look practically half the size of my head. Well, they're not that big, okay? But they're these little, like, cauliflower, rubbery, like, grains, we call them. And it's a mother culture of bacteria and yeast. It's not something that you could just spontaneously grow. In order to make culture, you have to have this mother culture. So you acquire it from a friend or Craigslist, or you buy it online. They're dehydrated at culturesforhealth.com. Anyway, you acquire these and you plop them into your milk, and depending on the weather, within 24 hours, depending on the temperature, within 24 hours, you'll have this beautiful yogurt-like fermented dairy beverage called kefir. Kefir. It's different from yogurt. It's tartar, it has more effervescence, and it has a lot more probiotics because the kefir culture itself is this symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, and there's way more of them. So in some ways you could argue that kefir is more beneficial in terms of that, but I'm not going to sit here and say, don't have yogurt, because yogurt is a wonderful probiotic food as well. So kefir is this beautiful thing. And so Alina's asking a couple questions here. The first issue was, she was having the issue with her milk going sour in the fridge because the fridge temperature was too low, and then her kefir wasn't turning out right. And she says, is that because of the bacteria in the milk competing with the kefir? So that means I need to explain something. So if your raw milk is going sour, Alina's on the right track here. That means that the native organisms that are in it are spontaneously souring the milk themselves, and that's called clabber. Spontaneously soured raw milk is called clabber. And so yes, there are organisms in the raw milk that at that point that could be competing with the kefir grains. However, I feel that it's more likely that it's something else. Yes, that could be a factor, but think about what the kefir grains need. Just like any cultured food, your starter culture needs something to eat. And in the case of kefir grains, and actually in the case of many of our ferments, the culture needs sugar in the form of starches and sugars in food. And so a kefir grain needs the lactose, that's the sugar in milk. So if the milk has started to spontaneously sour, the organisms that are just natively in the milk are beginning to consume that sugar. So then when you put the kefir grains in the milk, the food source is partially to all used up. So the kefir grains are not getting the food they need in addition to the competition from the organisms. Does that make sense, everyone? If you could just put a thumbs up or a yes in the comments, let me know if that makes sense to you. So Alina, I think it was a great move for you to discover that your milk was turning sour and that could be impacting the way your kefir grains were doing. And if they were stopping to grow and your kefir wasn't turning out, you're definitely onto something. So Sev is saying yes, great. This is why I recommend when you culture dairy, it's not bad to use older milk for cultured dairy, but milk that started to sour or turn or culture itself of any kind is just not going to produce the pure kind of ferment of another kind that you want, whether it's kefir or sour cream or yogurt or a cheese. If you're using older milk, you have other factors coming into play there with your culture, and so you're not going to get as consistent results as if you use fresh raw milk. Now, you say that your milk is staying fresh in the fridge for 3 weeks, and that's awesome. Great, I'm glad you find that helpful, Meg. If your fridge is cold and your jars are at the very back and you're not opening them, raw milk can stay fresh for several weeks. So you are doing great to have figured that out, and that you have fresh milk after 3 weeks is wonderful. It also goes back to the farm and the cleanliness of the farm and how quickly they're cooling the milk. So it sounds like your source, whether it's you, like if it's your own milk cow or your herd share or whatever your source is, they are doing a great job in producing that milk. So then when you get it and you put it at the back of the fridge, yes, clean jars, exactly, Meg. I mean, the clean jars, how fast they're cooling the milk, how clean the milking environment is, to when you put it in your fridge and you put it at the back and you keep those jars cold and your fridge is cold, all of those are going to impact how long the milk stays fresh. I don't want to scare anyone with this idea, though, because soured milk is not necessarily bad. So if your milk is not staying sweet and fresh for weeks and weeks and weeks, it doesn't mean it's bad. There is a continuum, and there is just a normal process where raw milk is going to spontaneously sour into clabber. And that's a beautiful, wonderful process, a process that I think God has given us. And soured milk is a beautiful thing of its own. Let's see what other questions. So I'm seeing in the, Meg is saying, yep. So I'm seeing in the comments other people's, it sounds like some light bulbs are going off, like maybe that's why your kefir is not working out. Well, if this has been helpful to you, I'm very, very thankful for that. Aline is also asking about yeasty. So now that she figured out the fresh issue, she's getting a layer of white kind of, what did she describe it as? A yeasty blanket on top. Okay, this is very normal because your kefir, it's in the jar, and I don't know what you're using to cover it, but if it's like a cloth napkin or a paper towel with a rubber band, the very top is exposed to the air. And right there at the air, it's very common to get a yeast overgrowth. It's not a harmful yeast overgrowth as long as it's not fuzzy and gray or pink. If it's just white and it's not fuzzy and it's just kind of a thin layer on top, I believe that's called, it's a K word, calm or something like that. And it's a common yeast overgrowth that can happen right at the top of your kefir. And you said you're stirring it in. You can do that. Calm yeast. Thank you, Meg, for clarifying that. K-A-H-M. It's calm yeast. It's very common. It's not bad. You can stir it in. I tend to skim it off, which is an option too. It just goes into the compost. So this is normal. If it's too strong and you feel that your kefir is better without it, like it tastes better without it, you could look into fermenting your kefir into airlock jars. And I love the Pickle Pro lid from homesteadersupply.com. An easy link for you is tradcookschool.com/picklepro, and that'll take you to these modified airlock lids. It's a Tatler canning lid that Jerry from Homesteader Supply has modified to put an airlock in. And because it's a canning lid, it fits on all your canning jars. So you can turn any of your wide mouth mason jars, half-gallon, pint, quart, into an airlock container to keep the oxygen out of your ferment, just very easily using this Pickle Pro. So if you're interested in looking into an oxygen-free environment, check out the Pickle Pro lids at tradcookschool.com/picklepro. Sev is saying they are amazing, love them. Me too, love them so much. Okay, so I think your grains are doing fine. Now, you said they're finally growing now that you fixed the milk. And you're kind of the big issue here is how do you know if they're not good anymore? Well, yours sound like they're doing great. They're producing kefir. They're at least maintaining. They're growing. Where I would be concerned that grains aren't doing well is when they are shrinking. So you can just tell they're not thriving. Now, kefir grains may just maintain or grow, and both of those are normal. But if they're shrinking and declining and it gets to the point where you're looking through your kefir and you just can't find them anymore, and it's not because they're there but you've missed them, they're just like they've just disappeared, those grains are not happy, and I would start over. I mean, and if they're gone to that point, of course, you have to start over. But if you're noticing that they're just smaller and smaller every time, something's not right. So look at your milk source. Is it going sour? Is there competing bacteria? Do you have like sourdough or kombucha or other things brewing in the same room that are competing and sharing? You know, we talked about this on a previous scope, that they're sharing in the air their organisms. So your kefir grains are, you know, it's just messing with them. Those are all factors. I kind of lost my train of thought there. So bottom line is, what concerns me on kefir grains is if they're shrinking and not producing kefir. But if they're maintaining and growing, you're doing fine. Now, the not producing kefir issue, if you have brand new grains to a new milk source, or you've changed the milk source to your current kefir grains, there has to be a transition period, because they're kind of like little people trying to adjust to new food. And changing the milk, the grains have to transition. So they may not make kefir for a few batches. So that you want to give time and not just immediately toss them out. Okay, so I have time to take a question or two related to Alina's question about kefir. Does anybody have any questions? And while you're thinking or typing your questions, if you're typing your question, make sure to include your first name, so that I can address you. Plus, I can read your first name on the phone better than I can read your handle. For questions in the future related to this or other issues, tweet me at Trad Cook School with the hashtag AskWardee, and I put them in the queue, or you can send an email to Wardee, W-A-R-D-E-E, at askwardee.tv. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And for those of you that are checking this out later, I'm just going to keep talking. If you guys have questions, here's a question. All right, so Saved by Grace. How often do you need to switch the milk if you're keeping a kefir hotel in the fridge? Once a week. I wouldn't go longer than that. The activity and the feeding and everything slows way down in the fridge because it's cold, but they still will run out of food in about a week, so switch it every week. Laura, are there ways to encourage the grains to grow? Basically, food source. So if your grains are doing okay but not growing, you could look at a new milk source just to see if they do well. If your grains are like coming back from being dehydrated, it could take months for them to start growing. They've been dried out. They're going to make kefir for you, but they're not going to grow for quite a while. So basically, there's no formula, but look at the food source. You're welcome, Christy. Look at the food source, so change the milk if possible. Give them time, and then regular batches. Like, don't let it go too long that they run out of food. So just kind of normal TLC is what what the grains need to keep growing well. Thank you so much, everyone, for the love, and feel free to continue sharing. You're welcome, Laura. Okay, so a couple housekeeping notes before we close. Remember to come back again next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Ask Wardee. Bring your drink and be ready to share what you're drinking. Sev says, what are your favorite things to make with kefir? I love to eat it plain or dressings or drip it through cheesecloth for like a dip. I also love to do smoothies. I love kefir. Okay, so for those of you that are checking this out later, hello. You might be here on my blog, askwardee.tv. You might be looking at it on YouTube. You might be on Periscope checking this out later. I'm happy you're here. Just so everybody knows, if you want to see this later, this is going to be up on Periscope for 24 hours at periscope.tv/tradcookschool. It will be up permanently at askwardee.tv within 24 hours. It will be my Thursday blog post, basically. I want to mention again to everyone that I'm continuing to record my podcast live sometime on Thursday on Periscope. So if you're on Periscope tomorrow, just keep checking in, and hopefully you can catch me live. Once again, I'll be sharing traditional cooking time-saving tips. And I hope you all know, you may not, so I'm just going to say it, my friend Meg from Eat Beautiful scopes right after me. So go to periscope.tv/MegEatBeautiful, or if you're on the app, be sure to follow at Meg Eat Beautiful, because she'll be scoping next, and she is doing a really cool scope today. She's talking about the best way to roast a delicata squash so that it's caramelized and tastes like candy. Doesn't that sound yummy? And perfect timing for Thanksgiving. I am planning to broadcast next week on Wednesday, even though it's the day before Thanksgiving. So I will see you all again then. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. I totally agree, Sev. Meg's book is amazing. tradcookschool.com/Megan if you guys haven't checked it out. Bye-bye.